A little girl said to a CEO, "My mom hasn't come home." He helped her and discovered something shocking that changed their lives forever. A story that will touch your heart. Subscribe, like, and comment where you are watching from. The morning fog still lingered over the streets of New York when David Anderson crossed Fifth Avenue with firm, calculated steps. At 52 years old, the CEO of Anderson Construction and Associates was known for his military punctuality and the coldness with which he conducted business. His impeccable dark grey Armani suit, navy blue tie, and polished Italian shoes reflected the image he had cultivated over decades, a successful, relentless man, completely focused on the growth of his business empire. The latest smartphone vibrated constantly in his pocket as he walked toward the 30-story mirrored building where his company was located. Urgent messages from architects, engineers, and investors flooded his screen. The 9 o'clock meeting would be crucial, a negotiation for $200 million for the construction of a new residential complex on the Upper East Side. David checked his luxury watch. 8:45. 15 minutes to cover 3 blocks, ascend to the 40th floor, and review the final details of the contract. It was then that a trembling little voice cut through the deafening noise of New York traffic like a sharp knife through silk. "Please, sir, have you seen my mom?" David stopped abruptly, nearly stumbling, his grey-blue eyes fixed on a little girl who barely reached his waist. She couldn't be more than 7 years old, with messy brown hair tied in 2 uneven pigtails and huge brown eyes filled with unshed tears. She wore a faded pink t-shirt with a butterfly design that had clearly been washed many times, a tattered denim skirt, and blue flip-flops. In her right arm, she tightly held a handmade doll dressed in yellow. "I'm sorry, little girl, but I'm late for an important meeting," David murmured, trying to sidestep the child. His voice had that formal, distant tone he used with anyone outside his business circle. "Please," the little girl insisted, her eyes filling with fresh tears. "My mom went out last night to work and hasn't come home. Ms. Hope said she always comes back before breakfast, but today she didn't. I waited a long time." David looked around, noticing that some people had already stopped to watch the scene. A man in a suit talking to a crying child on the street could generate unwanted comments, perhaps even photos that would end up on social media. His reputation as a serious businessman could be questioned. He sighed deeply and knelt to meet the girl's gaze. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emily," she replied, sniffling and wiping her nose on her t-shirt sleeve. "Emily Anderson. My mom's name is Sarah Anderson. She works cleaning buildings at night. She always comes home before I wake up, but she didn't come back last night." "And where do you live, Emily?" "At the Hope Residential Complex on Maple Street, number 422, apartment 312. The girl recited the address with impressive accuracy for someone so young, as if she had been trained to memorize this information in case of an emergency. David furrowed his brow. The name of the residential complex sounded familiar, but he couldn't remember why. He checked his watch again. 8:50. The meeting would start in 10 minutes, and he hadn't even arrived at the office yet. His secretary, Jessica, was probably already frantically calling to find out where he was. "Emily, where is this Ms. Hope you mentioned? She should be taking care of you." "She's at home, but she said she needed to go shopping at the market before it got too hot. I went out to look for my mom by myself." The girl lowered her eyes, clearly aware that she had disobeyed some rule. "Miss Hope said not to go out alone, but I really wanted to find my mom." David felt something strange stirring in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. Perhaps it was the way Emily held the doll, or the determination in her young voice when she spoke about looking for her mom. Or maybe it was the sudden memory of his own daughter Lily, when she was the same age, before the bitter divorce and constant fights over money and priorities drove her away from him for good. "All right, Emily, I'll take you back home and talk to Ms. Hope. Then we'll think about how to find your mom." The words left his mouth before he could stop them, surprising him as much as the girl herself. Emily's eyes lit up like stars. "You're really going to help me? For real?" "Yes, I will help, but first I need to make a call." David took out his smartphone and dialed Jessica with slightly trembling fingers. She answered on the first ring. "Mr. Anderson, thank God. The investors have already arrived and are in the meeting room. Where are you? You never run late." "Jessica, something unexpected came up. Reschedule the meeting for 3 o'clock. Tell the investors I had a family emergency." "Family emergency, sir, but you don't have... is everything okay with Lily?" "Everything is fine. Just reschedule and ask Michael to present the preliminary numbers if they insist on having any information today." David hung up and extended his hand to Emily. "Come on, little one. Let's go home." As they walked through the busy streets toward the nearest taxi stand, David couldn't stop wondering what he was doing. In over 20 years of his career, he had never cancelled an important meeting for any reason other than business-related matters. He glanced at the little girl beside him, who was now walking with lighter steps, whispering something to her doll. Emily held her doll tightly. "Emily, how long has your mother been working?" "Cleaning buildings. As long as I can remember. She always says she works in really nice buildings downtown with shiny glass that reflects the clouds. She said one day she would take me to see, but she can't because she works at night when I should be sleeping. Buildings with shiny glass in downtown New York." David felt a chill run down his spine. Could it be... "Has your mother ever mentioned the name of the company she works for?" Emily shook her head, her braids bouncing. "She just says she works for a cleaning company that cleans important buildings. Oh, and that the building she works in is very, very tall, with a gold sign in front." David's heart raced. His building had exactly a gold sign at the main entrance, and it was one of the tallest in the area. It would be an extraordinary coincidence if it were true. When they finally managed to get a taxi, and David told the driver the address of the Hope residential complex, the driver looked in the rearview mirror with a curious expression. A businessman, obviously wealthy, in a taxi with a clearly lower-class child, heading to one of the simplest housing complexes in the East Side. During the ride, Emily talked about her routine. She woke up early, had coffee with Ms. Hope, went to the local public school, came home, did her homework, and waited for her mother to arrive. On weekends, they went to the park or stayed home watching cartoons on the small television they managed to buy the year before. When they arrived at the Hope residential complex, David finally understood why the name sounded familiar. It was one of his projects built 5 years ago. At the time, it was one of the housing program projects aimed at low-income families. He vaguely remembered signing the contracts and participating in the inauguration ceremony for the official photos, but he had never returned to see how the development was functioning. Now, observing the 5-story buildings with peeling paint, visible leaks on the outer walls, and a playground with rusty equipment, David felt a pang of something he couldn't identify. Shame, perhaps, or responsibility. "It's there. Apartment 312. Emily pointed to the 3rd floor of the second building, practically bouncing with joy. They climbed the narrow concrete stairs, David noticing that the railing was loose in some places, and that several hallway lights were burned out. When they reached the door of apartment 312, Emily knocked with her small fists in a specific rhythm, clearly a code that she and Ms. Hope had established. "Emily? Girl, you had me worried. Where did you go without telling me?" The voice came from inside the apartment, followed by the sound of several locks being opened. The door opened, and David found himself face to face with Ms. Hope. Ms. Hope was a 70-year-old woman with grey hair tied in a loose bun, deep wrinkles that told stories of decades of hard work, and brown eyes that sparkled with wisdom gained through life. She wore a simple dress patterned with small flowers, worn slippers, and an apron that had seen better days. When her eyes landed on David, the tall, elegantly dressed man next to Emily, her expression quickly shifted from confusion to suspicion. "Emily, who is this gentleman?" Ms. Hope asked, instinctively pulling the girl closer to her. Her voice had that protective tone that only an experienced mother or grandmother can produce. "Miss Hope, this is the gentleman who is going to help us find my mother," Emily replied excitedly, still holding her doll tightly. "He is very important and said he can find out where she is." David politely extended his hand. "Good morning, Ms. Hope. My name is David Anderson. I found Emily on the street looking for her mother, and I offered to help. I thought it would be better to bring her home first." Ms. Hope studied David for a long moment, before shaking his hand with calloused and surprisingly firm fingers. "David Anderson. That name sounds familiar. You wouldn't happen to own a big company, would you?" "I'm the CEO of Anderson Construction and Associates. In fact, I believe my company built this housing complex a few years ago." Ms. Hope's eyes widened, and her expression changed completely. "You are the owner of the construction company? You—" She paused, clearly struggling with her words. "Please, come in. I think we need to talk." The two-bedroom apartment was small, but impeccably organized. The living room had a two-seater sofa covered with a colorful crocheted blanket, an old television on a simple wooden stand, and some framed photographs on the walls, mostly of Emily at different ages, and a young woman who was clearly her mother. The ceramic floor was polished to a shine, and there was a vase with artificial flowers on the coffee table, trying to add a touch of cheer to the modest environment. "Please, have a seat," Ms. Hope indicated the sofa. "Emily, go wash your hands and get a glass of water for the gentleman." When the girl left the room, Ms. Hope sat in the old rocking chair that occupied the corner of the living room and fixed her penetrating gaze on David. "Mr. Anderson, I need to be direct with you. Sarah, Emily's mother, left for work last night at 10 o'clock. As she always does from Monday to Friday. She works for Clean Co., which does nighttime maintenance for several commercial buildings here in the city. Sarah always comes home at 6:30 in the morning, without exception. Today, for the first time in 3 years, she did not show up." David felt his stomach tighten. "Do you know which buildings she specifically works in?" "I know that one of them is a building. In the heart of the city, there was a tall building with a golden sign. Sarah always talked about it because she was impressed by its size and beauty. She worked the night shift, from 11 at night to 5 in the morning, cleaning offices after everyone left." "Ms. Hope, there's a very high possibility that Sarah works in my building," David said slowly. "My company is headquartered in a 40-story building with a golden sign at the entrance. If that's the building, I can investigate what happened last night." Ms. Hope abruptly stood up, walking to the small window that overlooked the courtyard of the residential complex. "Mr. Anderson, I have raised 8 children, buried my husband 15 years ago, and I've been taking care of Emily since. She was 2 years old when Sarah started working nights. I learned to read between the lines of life." She turned to face him again. "You're not here just out of the kindness of your heart. No one cancels important commitments to help a stranger's child on the street, especially someone in your position. What's really going on?" David was silent for a few seconds, impressed by the elderly woman's perception. "Ms. Hope, to be completely honest, I don't even know why I'm here. When I saw Emily on the street, crying and looking for her mother, something changed. Maybe it's because I have a daughter the same age as Emily when my ex-wife and I divorced. Maybe it's guilt. I don't know." "Guilt about what?" David looked around the small apartment, noticing the stains on the ceiling and the peeling paint on the walls. If this is really one of the residential complexes my company built, then I'm partially responsible for your living conditions. And if Sarah works in my building and something happened to her— Mr. Anderson, Ms. Hope interrupted him, her voice softening a bit, do you want to know the truth about this? And place, about what it's like to live here? David nodded. Since we moved here 4 years ago, we've had plumbing issues 3 times. The electrical wiring burned out last winter, and we were without power in the apartment for 2 months until we could save enough money to pay a private electrician. The elevator breaks down at least once a month. The leak started in the 2nd year, and the management always says it's on the repair list. Emily returned to the room carrying a glass of water on a porcelain saucer, concentrating hard not to spill. Here you go, Mr. David. Thank you, Emily. David accepted the glass and took a sip of the water, which was surprisingly cold and refreshing. Ms. Hope makes the best water in the world, Emily proclaimed proudly. She puts it in the fridge with some special leaves that grow in pots by the window. Mint, Miss Hope explained with a small smile. I learned from my mother how to grow herbs in small spaces. David watched as Emily settled on the floor next to the rocking chair, instinctively leaning against Miss Hope's leg. The intimacy and affection between them were evident. A family created by circumstances and held together by mutual love. Miss Hope, could you tell me more about Sarah, about her work situation? The elderly woman sighed deeply. Sarah is 28 years old. She's a hard-working, honest girl who does everything she can to provide the best for Emily. The girl's father disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy, so she has been raising her daughter alone since the beginning. And how did she get the job at Clean Co? It was through an acquaintance who already worked there. Sarah tried to find a daytime job for almost a year, but without a college education and with a small child, it was difficult. The night job pays better, and I offered to take care of Emily during the night. David noticed that Emily was listening to the conversation attentively, her big eyes moving between the 2 adults as if it were a tennis match. How much does Sarah earn per month, if it's not too intrusive to ask? $1,200, Ms. Hope replied without hesitation. It may seem little to people like you, but for us, it's what allows us to pay the rent, buy food, and keep Emily. In school, David quickly did the mental math. $1,200 a month for working 6 hours a night, 5 days a week. It was less than $5 an hour, well below the minimum wage. He knew that subcontracted companies often paid lower rates, but he had never done the real calculations. Ms. Hope, I need to make some calls to investigate what happened to Sarah last night. Can I use my phone here? Of course, sir. I'll prepare some coffee while you make your calls. As Miss Hope headed to the small kitchen and Emily distracted herself. By fixing her doll's hair, David took out his smartphone and began dialing his executive assistant. Michael, it's me, David. I need you to get urgent information about all the subcontracted cleaning companies that service our building. I want the names of the companies, work hours, and a complete list of all the employees who work there. Yes, it's urgent. I want that information in an hour. The next call was to the building security. Security Center? This is David Anderson. I need to speak with the night shift supervisor from yesterday. Was there any incident involving cleaning staff? Any emergencies, accidents, or unusual situations? While waiting to be transferred to the night supervisor, David looked out the apartment window and saw dozens of other identical apartments, with clothes hanging on small balconies and children playing in the courtyard below. Each of those apartments housed a family, people with stories, dreams, and struggles like Sarah and Emily. For the first time in his career, David Anderson began to wonder who the people were that lived in the buildings his company constructed and what price they paid. To keep the business empire he had spent decades building running smoothly, the Night shift security supervisor, Mr. Thompson, a 55-year-old man with a hoarse voice from decades of smoking, answered the phone in a respectful yet clearly nervous tone while speaking with the CEO of the company. "Mr. Anderson, good afternoon. Last night was a normal night without major incidents. We logged the cleaning crew's entry at 11 p.m. as always. CleanCo sent 6 employees, including... Let me check here. Including Sarah Anderson." David felt his heart race. And the exit? Did all the employees leave at the normal time? There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Sir, actually there was a small incident last night. Around 3 a.m. one of the cleaning staff fell ill. The CleanCo supervisor said she fainted in the restroom on the 35th floor. An ambulance was called and she was taken to the hospital." "And what is the name of this employee?" "Sarah Anderson, sir. The CleanCo supervisor, Mr. Roberts, said it was something related to fatigue and low blood pressure. He assured me it wasn't serious." David closed his eyes, feeling a mix of relief and concern. Sarah hadn't simply disappeared. She was in a hospital. But why hadn't anyone contacted her family? "Mr. Thompson, which hospital was she taken to?" "The closest one, sir. City Hospital, but the CleanCo supervisor said it was standard protocol and that she would be released by morning." "And why wasn't the family contacted?" Another pause. "Sir, that wouldn't be our responsibility. CleanCo should have... Well, to be honest, we in security don't have direct contact with the contracted employees. They come in, do the job, and leave. Communication is always through the supervisors of the contracting companies." David hung up and immediately dialed Michael again. "Michael, I need the contact details for CleanCo now, and I want the number for City Hospital. Sarah Anderson was admitted there early this morning." While waiting for the information, David returned to the room where Miss Hope was serving freshly brewed coffee in small white porcelain cups. The rich, strong aroma filled the space, creating a hospitable atmosphere that starkly contrasted with the tension he felt. "Miss Hope, I found Sarah. She fell ill during work last night and was taken to City Hospital. I'm calling there now to find out how she is." Emily jumped up from the floor where she had been playing with her doll. "My mum is in the hospital. Is she sick? Can I visit her?" "Calm down, dear," Ms. Hope said, carefully picking Emily up in a way that revealed her age. "Let's first find out how she is, and then we can decide what to do." David called the hospital, and after being transferred 3 times, finally managed to speak with a nurse in the emergency department. "Sarah Anderson, let me check. Yes, she was admitted here at 3:15 a.m. She is in the observation ward. The doctor diagnosed severe malnutrition, anemia, and physical exhaustion. She has not yet been discharged. Can I speak about her condition? I'm a relative." "Sir, she is stable, but the doctor said these are signs of overwork and inadequate nutrition. She will likely need to stay hospitalized at least until tomorrow for hydration and observation." David thanked her and hung up, looking at the 2 women who were waiting anxiously. "Sarah is okay, but she will need to stay in the hospital for another day. She was very tired and needed medical care," he explained, trying to soften the reality for Emily. "I want to see my mom," Emily said, with a determination that surprised David. "Can I go visit her, please?" "Of course, dear. We'll all visit her this afternoon," David replied before fully processing what he was saying. Once again, the words left his mouth before he could rationally analyze them. Ms. Hope watched him with curiosity. "Mr. Anderson, you don't need to get so involved. We can take the bus to the hospital." "No," David interrupted her. "I will drive you there. And I want to speak to Sarah personally about her working conditions." While waiting for visiting hours at the hospital, David took the opportunity to learn more about the residential complex. Ms. Hope and Emily took him on a tour of the hallways and common areas, and what he saw made him increasingly uncomfortable. In the playground, 2 of the 3 seesaws were broken. The slide had a dangerous crack in the middle, and the safety fence had several holes. "The kids get hurt here all the time," Ms. Hope commented casually. "Last month, Lisa's son from apartment 205 cut his arm on this fence. He needed stitches." In the building next door, David noticed that several windows were covered with plastic instead of glass. The storm last year broke many windows, Ms. Hope explained. The management said they would replace them, but they only replaced half. The rest of the families had to find a way. In the utility room, located in the basement, David observed rusty equipment and exposed wiring. As an engineer, he knew this posed serious safety risks. "Ms. Hope, how many families live in this complex?" 240 families, sir. 5 buildings, 48 apartments in each. Almost all have children." David did the mental math. 240 families living in precarious conditions in a building that bore his signature. How many Sarah Andersons were there? How many people were working in subhuman conditions to maintain the profits of companies like his? Back in the apartment, Emily showed David her drawings. She had a school notebook where she drew colorful buildings with worn-out colored pencils. "When I grow up, I will be an engineer and build beautiful buildings for everyone to live in," she said, her eyes shining. "These drawings are very beautiful, Emily. Do you like math?" "I love it. I'm the best in the class. Ms. Rosa always says I'm very smart." David took a blank sheet of paper and started to draw a simple floor plan. "Emily, how about I teach you how engineers design buildings?" For an hour, David found himself explaining basic concepts of architecture and engineering to a 7-year-old girl who absorbed everything with impressive curiosity. Emily asked intelligent questions and understood concepts that many adults would struggle to grasp. "Mr. David," Emily suddenly said, "why are some buildings beautiful and others are not?" The question hit David like a punch in the stomach. "What do you mean, Emily?" "Well, I see in the magazines that Ms. Hope sometimes brings from the doctor's office. Very beautiful buildings with gardens and pools. But here where we live, the walls are peeling and the playground is broken. Why are some beautiful and others not?" David looked at Ms. Hope, who was watching the scene with a mix of sadness and hope. "Emily," David said slowly, "that's a very important question. And to be honest, I think some people, like me, have forgotten that everyone deserves to live in beautiful and safe places." At 2 in the afternoon, David took Ms. Hope and Emily to the city hospital in his black BMW. The contrast between the luxury car and the reality of the public hospital was striking. The parking lot was full, the corridors overcrowded, and there was a huge line for information. David used his influence and contacts to gain quicker access, but he couldn't help but notice the uncomfortable looks from people in line as they passed by. For the first time, he felt embarrassed by his privileges. When they finally reached Sarah's room, David encountered a young woman, too thin, with deep, dark circles and straight brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Even lying in the hospital bed, wearing a faded blue hospital gown, she had a natural dignity that impressed David. "Mom!" Emily ran to the bed, and Sarah hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her face. "My daughter, I'm sorry for making you worry. Mommy wasn't feeling well, but I'm better now." David watched the reunion, feeling an emotion he hadn't experienced in years. The pure joy of Emily seeing her mother, the evident relief of Sarah, and the quiet satisfaction of Ms. Hope created a scene of such intimacy and love that he almost felt like an intruder. "Sarah," Ms. Hope said softly, "this is Mr. David Anderson. He was the one who helped us find you." Sarah looked at David with curiosity and gratitude. "Thank you so much, sir. Ms. Hope told me you were the one who brought Emily home when she went looking for me." Sarah, I own the construction company that built the building where you work, and I also own Anderson Construction, which built the Hope residential complex where you live. I came here because I need to understand what happened to you last night." Sarah's expression changed. She looked nervously at Emily, then at Ms. Hope, and finally back at David. "Mr. Anderson, I don't want to lose my job. If anyone from Clean Co. finds out I'm talking to you about work—" "Sarah, you're not going to lose your job. On the contrary, I need to know the truth about your working conditions, and I promise that nothing you tell me will be used against you." Sarah hesitated, looked once more at Emily, and then began to tell a story that would forever change David's perception of his own business empire. Sarah adjusted herself in the hospital bed, her hands trembling slightly as she held Emily's small hand. The shared room had 4 beds, separated only by thin curtains, and the constant noise of other patients and visitors created a tense and claustrophobic environment. "Mr. Anderson," Sarah began in a low voice, "I've worked at Clean Co. for 3 years. I started right after Emily turned 4 and could stay with Ms. Hope during the nights." David pulled a plastic chair closer to the bed. "Tell me about your work routine, Sarah." "I leave home at 10 at night and arrive at the building at 11. I work until 5 in the morning, 6 days a week. I clean 12 floors by myself. Offices, restrooms, hallways, elevators. That's about 200 rooms a night." 200 rooms? David frowned. "Is that even humanly possible?" Sarah let out a bitter laugh. "It's not possible to do it right, sir. We do what we can in the time we have. Quickly vacuuming carpets, emptying trash cans, cleaning visible surfaces. There's no time for deep cleaning." Ms. Hope, who had remained silent until then, spoke up. "Sarah comes home exhausted every day. Sometimes she can barely eat breakfast before collapsing in bed. And how much do you earn for this shift?" David asked, although Miss Hope had already mentioned the amount. $1,200 a month, but after deductions for transportation, uniform, cleaning supplies, I actually end up with about $900. David quickly did the mental math. 6 nights a week, 6 hours a night, 26 days a month. That amounted to approximately 156 hours monthly. $900 divided by 156 hours resulted in less than $6 an hour, far below the national minimum wage. "Sarah, how did you faint last night?" Sarah looked at Emily, who was listening attentively, and chose her words carefully. I hadn't had a proper dinner. Sometimes, when money gets tight at the end of the month, I save food for Emily and only eat breakfast and lunch." "Mom, you didn't tell me you were going hungry," Emily said in a tiny voice. Tears filled her eyes. "It's not about starving, my daughter. Mommy sometimes eats less to make sure you have everything you need." David felt something breaking inside his chest. "Sarah, forgive me for asking, but why didn't you look for another job? Something with better conditions?" Sarah smiled sadly. "Mr. Anderson, with all due respect, have you ever tried to find a job as a single mother without a college degree? I tried for a year. Day jobs pay even less, and I would have to pay for daycare for Emily. The better jobs require experience I don't have, or a degree I can't afford. And how does the company Clean Co. treat its employees?" Sarah hesitated again. "Sir, the supervisor, Mr. Johnson, always says we are lucky to have jobs, that if we are not satisfied, there's a line of people wanting our positions. We don't have breaks, we don't get meal vouchers, and if we arrive 5 minutes late, it's deducted from our pay. And safety equipment, training." "Equipment?" Sarah laughed again, but it was a humorless laugh. "Sir, we use our own gloves, our own rags. The company only provides the cleaning chemicals, and even then, they sometimes go weeks without restocking." David thought about the contracts he regularly signed with outsourcing companies, always focusing on the lowest possible price. He had never questioned how these companies managed to offer such low rates. "Sarah, I want you to tell me exactly what happened last night." "I was cleaning the 35th floor when I started to feel dizzy. I had only eaten bread with coffee for breakfast and a little rice for lunch for 2 days. When I got to the women's restroom on that floor, everything started spinning, and I fainted." "And how long were you unconscious?" "I'm not sure. When I woke up, Mr. Johnson was shaking me and shouting that I was delaying the work. He said if I couldn't finish cleaning, he would deduct it from my pay." David involuntarily clenched his fists. "And that's when they called the ambulance?" "No, sir. Mr. Johnson said it. It was just exhaustion, that I was being dramatic. He told me to go to the restroom, wash my face, and get back to work. But when I tried to get up, I fainted again. That's when the building security guard, Mr. Thompson, insisted on calling the ambulance." "And why didn't anyone contact Ms. Hope?" Sarah lowered her eyes. "Sir, CleanCo doesn't have our emergency contacts. In fact, they didn't even ask when they hired me. And when I got to the hospital, I was so confused that I couldn't remember Ms. Hope's phone number." Ms. Hope stood up and walked to the hospital window, which overlooked a nearby low-income neighborhood. "Mr. Anderson, Sarah is not the only one. My neighbor, Ms. Smith, works as a maid 6 days a week and earns $800. Her husband, Mr. Johnson, works in construction and goes months without a steady job." "And in the residential complex, how many people face similar situations?" "Most, sir. There are people who work as street vendors, recyclables collectors, cooks in low-cost restaurants. They are honest, hard-working people, but they earn little and always live on the edge." David stood up and walked to the window beside Ms. Hope. Looking at the urban landscape, he realized he was seeing the city for the first time from the perspective of those struggling to survive in it, not from the heights of mirrored skyscrapers. "Sarah," he said, returning to the bedside, "do you know other people who work under similar conditions to yours?" "Of course, sir. Mary works cleaning another building downtown and earns even less. Jack works as a night doorman 6 days a week. Sandy is a kitchen assistant in a restaurant and works 12 hours a day. And do all of you live in the Hope residential complex?" "Most do. It's one of the few places we can afford to pay rent with our salaries." David closed his eyes for a moment, processing the information. The residential complex his company had built housed exactly the people who kept the high-end commercial and residential buildings he also constructed running. It was a perfect cycle of exploitation disguised as opportunity. "Mr. Anderson," Emily suddenly said, "can you make buildings as beautiful as the ones in magazines for people like us too?" Emily's innocent question echoed in the room like a scream. David looked at the 7-year-old girl who dreamed of being an engineer, at the mother who deprived herself of food to ensure her daughter could eat, and at the elderly woman who had dedicated her life to caring for people who weren't even her family. "Emily," David said, kneeling beside the bed to be at eye level with the girl, "I promise you I will try. But for that, I need to learn many things I didn't know before." At that moment, David's phone rang. It was Michael, his executive assistant. "Mr. Anderson, I got the information you requested about the outsourcing companies. Would you like me to read it over the phone or prepare a report?" "Read it now, Michael." "CleanCo is one of 6 cleaning companies that provide services to our building. They are responsible for floors 25 to 40. The current contract is for $80,000 a month for cleaning 16 floors, 6 days a week. They employ 12 workers in total." David quickly calculated. $80,000 divided by 12 workers came to approximately $6,600 per worker. If Sarah earned only $900 net per month, where were the other $5,700? Michael, I want a complete audit of all the outsourcing companies working with us. Salaries, working conditions, safety equipment, everything. And I want the names of the owners of CleanCo. Yes, sir. Anything else? Yes, I want a meeting tomorrow morning with all the directors. Let's review our policy on hiring subcontractors. When David hung up, he noticed that Sarah, Ms. Hope, and Emily were watching him with expressions of curiosity mixed with hope. Sarah, David said, you will return to work when you feel better, but things will change. I promise. Mr. Anderson, I don't want to cause problems for CleanCo. I need this job. You didn't cause problems, Sarah. The problems already existed. You just helped me see them. As they left the hospital, the sun was setting over New York, painting the sky orange and pink. David watched people walking along the sidewalks, workers returning home after long days, street vendors organizing their goods, children playing in the few open spaces between the buildings. For the first time in his adult life, David Anderson was not seeing the city as a collection of business opportunities, but as the home of millions of people who, like Sarah and Emily, struggled daily for dignity and hope. And for the first time, he wondered what kind of man he had become by building his empire on foundations he had never bothered to examine. The next morning, David arrived at his office before 7, 2 hours earlier than his usual schedule. He had spent the entire night awake, reviewing every word of the conversation with Sarah and taking notes in a notebook, something he hadn't done since college. His office on the 40th floor, with a panoramic view of New York, felt different. The imported mahogany furniture, the Persian rug, the artwork on the walls, everything that once represented success now made him feel uncomfortable. Jessica, his secretary for 15 years, arrived at 8 and was surprised to find him already working. "Mr. Anderson, are you okay? I've never seen you here this early." "Jessica, cancel all my appointments for today, except the 10 o'clock meeting with the directors. That one is a priority, and I need you to get me some information. How many subcontracted employees work in our building, and which companies are responsible?" "Of course, sir. I'll check with the facilities department." At 9:30, David was in the conference room, watching his 5 directors enter with their leather briefcases and state-of-the-art laptops. Michael Johnson, the CFO, an impeccably dressed 45-year-old. Carla Smith, the HR director, a 50-year-old woman known for her efficiency. Roberto Brown, the construction director, a 60-year-old engineer who had been with the company since the beginning. Mark Davis, the sales director, a 40-year-old man skilled in closing lucrative contracts. And Anna White, the legal director, a 38-year-old lawyer hired 2 years ago. "Good morning, everyone," David began, skipping the usual pleasantries. "I called this meeting to discuss our subcontracting policy." Michael frowned. "Mr. Anderson, has there been a problem with our suppliers? The numbers are all within expectations. Michael, I want you to explain to me how our hiring of cleaning companies works." "Well, we follow the market standard. We open an internal bidding process, receive proposals, and hire the company that offers the best price while maintaining the minimum required quality." "And how do we define minimum quality?" Roberto spoke up. "We check if the company has an active business license, if they don't have significant labor disputes, and if they can provide the necessary number of employees to cover all shifts." "And what about the salaries of the employees from these companies? Does anyone check?" Carla, the HR director, seemed uncomfortable. "Mr. Anderson, technically that is the responsibility of the subcontracted companies. We don't have direct management over their employees." David stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the city. "I want you to explain something to me. CleanCo receives $80,000 a month from us. They employ 12 workers. That's approximately $6,600 per employee. Can anyone explain to me why a CleanCo employee only takes home $900 a month?" The silence in the room was awkward. The directors, exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Mr. Anderson," Mark, the sales director, said cautiously, "I imagine there are operational costs, taxes, equipment." "Mark, even considering all possible costs, there's too much money left over for the subcontracted company, and it's left over at the expense of exploiting workers who can barely feed themselves properly." Anna, the legal director, spoke up. "Mr. Anderson, from a legal standpoint, we have no direct responsibility over the salary practices of subcontracted companies, as long as they comply with labor legislation." "Anna, yesterday I met a 28-year-old woman who fainted from hunger in our building because she works 6 nights a week for $900. She has a 7-year-old daughter and deprives herself of food to ensure the child can eat. This may be legal, but it's not right." Roberto, the senior construction director, cleared his throat. "David, I understand your concern, but it has always worked this way. If we increase subcontracting costs, our competitors will have a competitive advantage." "Roberto, are you telling me that our success depends on keeping people in misery?" "It's not exactly like that, David. It's just that it is exactly like that," David slammed his hand on the table, surprising everyone. "We built an empire based on the exploitation of people we don't even know, and I've been complicit in this for years." Carla tried to mediate. "Mr. Anderson, what exactly do you propose we do?" David returned to his chair. "I want a complete audit of all the subcontracted companies that work with us. Real salaries of the employees, working conditions, safety equipment, workload, everything." "And if we find irregularities?" Anna asked. "We will demand changes, and if the companies refuse to improve conditions, we will terminate the contracts and find companies that treat their employees with dignity." Michael leaned forward. "David, this could increase our operational costs by up to 40%. "Then let them increase. I'd rather have smaller profits and sleep peacefully at night." "Mr. Anderson," Johnson said, "with all due respect, the shareholders are not going to understand this change in strategy. The shareholders will have to understand that social responsibility is not just marketing, it's a moral obligation." The meeting continued for 2 hours, with David explaining his new vision for the company. Some directors were receptive, while others were clearly resistant. In the end, he set a 1-week deadline for each department to present an implementation plan for the new social responsibility policies. In the afternoon, David decided to do something he had never done: personally visit the company's construction sites. His first stop was a site in the Upper East Side where a high-end residential condominium was being built. The contrast was shocking. While the project plans showed luxurious apartments with imported finishes, the construction site was a scene of makeshift conditions and precariousness. The workers wore old helmets and clearly inadequate safety equipment. The cafeteria was a temporary structure with wooden benches and no proper ventilation. David approached a group of bricklayers who were on their lunch break. "Good afternoon. I'm David Anderson, owner of the construction company. May I speak with you?" The workers immediately stood up, clearly nervous about the presence of the boss. "Please relax. I just want to know how the working conditions are here." John Smith, a 50-year-old bricklayer with calloused hands and a sunburned face, was the first to speak. "Mr. Anderson, we don't want to complain. We're happy to have jobs." "John, it's not a complaint. I really want to know if you have everything you need to work safely." Another younger worker named Robert spoke up. "Sir, sometimes we lack safety equipment, and the housing where some colleagues stay doesn't have hot showers." David spent 3 hours at the site, talking to workers, observing the conditions and taking notes. He discovered that many earned only minimum wage, worked 10 hours a day, and that several small accidents occurred weekly. By the end of the afternoon, David returned to the Hope residential complex. He wanted to see Emily and know how Sarah was recovering. When he arrived at apartment 312, he found a scene that deeply moved him. Emily was at the dining table, surrounded by schoolbooks, doing homework with total concentration. Ms. Hope was in the kitchen, preparing dinner and humming a country song softly. And Sarah, who had been discharged from the hospital that morning, was sitting on the couch helping Emily with math. "Mr. Anderson!" Emily shouted upon seeing him, running to hug him. "My mom is back home, and she said she's going to teach me to do even harder math." "Hello, Emily. Sarah, how are you feeling?" "Much better, Mr. Anderson. The doctor said I need to eat better and rest more, but I'm already feeling good." Miss Hope appeared at the kitchen door, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Anderson, it's great that you came. I was preparing chicken with okra. Will you have dinner with us?" David hesitated. He had dined in expensive restaurants his whole life, always alone or in business meetings. The idea of a homemade meal with family in a simple apartment was something completely outside of his experience. "I don't want to impose." "Impose nothing," Ms. Hope said firmly. "You've helped us so much. It's the least we can do." During dinner, David experienced something he hadn't felt in decades, the genuine warmth of a family. Emily talked about her day at school, Sarah shared her plans to look for a night course to improve her education, and Ms. Hope shared stories from her youth in the rural Midwest. "Mr. Anderson," Emily suddenly said, "do you have family?" "I have a daughter a little older than you, Emily, but she lives far away, with her mother." "Do you miss her?" Emily's simple question hit David deeply. "I miss her a lot, Emily." "Why doesn't she come to visit you?" David looked at Sarah and Ms. Hope, who were watching the conversation with respect but were clearly interested. "Because for a long time I thought that working hard and making a lot of money was the best way to take care of her. But I forgot to spend time with her, to really get to know her. But now you can fix that, can't you?" Emily said with the innocent wisdom of children. "I hope so, Emily, I hope so." When David left the housing complex that night, he carried a takeout container that Ms. Hope had insisted he take. "So you don't have to eat alone tomorrow," she had said. In the car, driving back to his empty 300-square-meter apartment in the gardens, David called Lily, his 15-year-old daughter, who lived in Paris with his ex-wife. "Dad, it's strange to hear from you. Is something wrong?" "Hi, Lily. Nothing bad happened. I just wanted to hear your voice." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Dad, are you okay? You never call just to chat." "Lily, I met a girl your age yesterday, and she made me realize how much I miss you." "Really, Dad?" "What girl?" David spent half an hour telling Lily about Emily, Sarah, Ms. Hope, and how they had changed his perspective on everything. "Dad, that's amazing. You sound different, more human." "Lily, how about you come spend the December holidays with me? I really want you to meet these people who changed my life." "Dad, I would love that. It's been so long since we really spent time together." When David hung up, he realized he was crying. For the first time in years, it wasn't tears of frustration or anger, but of hope. The transformation had only just begun. The following week, David implemented changes that put the entire company on high alert. He cancelled 3 important meetings with international investors to dedicate himself exclusively to auditing the outsourced companies. He hired an independent consulting firm specializing in labor rights and began personally visiting all the construction sites of the company. It was during one of these visits that the first major revelation hit him like in the construction site of the Clear Waters complex in the Upper East Side, David Anderson found Jack Smith, a 42-year-old bricklayer who lived in the same Hope residential complex as Sarah and Emily. The coincidence made him stop to talk to the man who was laying bricks under the scorching sun at 2 in the afternoon. "Jack, do you live in the Hope residential complex?" "Yes, sir. Apartment 217. Do you know anyone from there?" "I know Sarah Anderson and her daughter Emily." Jack's face lit up. "Sarah, a hard-working woman, and Emily is such a sweet child. She always helps my wife carry the groceries when she sees her at the market." David observed the conditions around. Jack had been working for 7 hours straight under the sun, without adequate shade, with only 2 15-minute breaks. His helmet was cracked, and the safety gloves were clearly second-hand. "Jack, may I ask how much you earn working here?" The bricklayer looked nervously around before answering. 1.5 salaries, sir. $1,800. I work from Monday to Saturday, sometimes Sunday, when we need to speed up the construction." David quickly calculated. Jack worked at least 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. That amounted to 60 hours a week, approximately 240 hours a month. $1,800 divided by 240 hours resulted in $7.50 per hour. "And do you have a family?" "I do, sir. My wife Mary works as a housekeeper, and we have 2 children. The oldest, who is 16, is finishing high school and wants to go to college. The youngest is 12. "Can you manage to live on that income?" Jack lowered his voice. "It's tough, sir. Sometimes there's little left at the end of the month, but I don't complain. Jobs are hard to come by." David spent the rest of the afternoon observing the workers' routine. He discovered that the cafeteria had no functioning refrigerator, that several workers brought lunchboxes from home that spoiled in the heat, and that there was no infirmary or any type of medical assistance on site. When he returned to the office, he found a preliminary audit report on Clean Co. on his desk. What he read made him furious. Mr. Johnson's company, owner of Clean Co., was making $320,000 a month just from contracts with Anderson Construction. They employed 48 workers in total, who earned on average $900 to $1,200 a month. The rest of the money, approximately $200,000 a month, went to administrative costs and company profits. Mr. Johnson lived in a mansion in the suburbs, drove a BMW, and had recently bought a $200,000 yacht. Meanwhile, Sarah was fainting from hunger while cleaning the building that generated profits for his company. David picked up the phone and called Mr. Johnson directly. "Mr. Johnson, this is David Anderson from Anderson Construction. I need to schedule an urgent meeting with you." "Of course, Mr. Anderson. It's an honor to receive your call. When would be convenient?" "Tomorrow at 9 in the morning at my office." "Perfect. Is there any specific topic you would like me to prepare?" "Yes, bring all documents related to the salaries and working conditions of your employees." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Anderson, has there been a problem with our services?" "We'll discuss that in person tomorrow." That night, David decided to have dinner again at the Hope Residential Complex. It had become a ritual. 3 times a week he would show up to visit Emily, check on how Sarah was recovering, and enjoy the company of Ms. Hope. When he arrived at apartment 312, he found Emily doing math homework at the dining table. The problems were about fractions and division, and she was completely focused. "Hi, Mr. Anderson. Look at this tough problem Ms. Johnson assigned." David sat next to her and observed the problem. "Emily, you know that math is the foundation of engineering." "Really? Then I need to be really good at math to build beautiful buildings." "Exactly. And you're already very good. How about I bring you some more advanced math books?" Emily's eyes sparkled. "Would you really do that?" Sarah appeared at the kitchen door, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Mr. Anderson, you're spoiling Emily too much. She talks about you all day at school. Sarah, can I talk to you for a few minutes?" They sat on the small sofa while Emily continued to focus on her homework. David told her about the audit of Clean Co. and his discovery of the company's exploitative practices. "Sarah, I want you to know that I will demand changes at Clean Co. Better salaries, better conditions, proper equipment." Sarah turned pale. "Mr. Anderson, with all due respect, this could cost me my job if Mr. Johnson finds out that I was the one who spoke about the conditions." "Sarah, you didn't say anything I shouldn't know as a responsible businessman, and I assure you that you won't lose your job." "But what if he fires me anyway? How will I support Emily?" David hesitated for a moment, then said something that surprised him. "Sarah, if anything happens to your job, I personally guarantee that you and Emily won't go without." Sarah looked at him with a mix of gratitude and distrust. "Why are you doing all this for us?" David looked at Emily, who had stopped doing her homework and was listening to the conversation attentively. "Sarah, for 20 years, I built a company thinking only about numbers, profits, costs, margins. I never thought about the people behind those numbers. Emily made me realize that every number represents a life, a family, dreams and hopes." "You have a daughter, don't you?" Sarah asked softly. "I do. Lily. She's 15 and lives in Paris with her mother. When Emily asked me why my daughter doesn't come to visit, I realized that I spent so much time building wealth that I forgot to build relationships." Emily entered the room carrying a tray with brewed coffee and homemade carrot cake. "Mr. David, may I give you some advice from someone who has lived a lot?" "Of course, Ms. Hope." "The richest people I have known in life didn't have much money. They had a lot of love. Money helps, yes, but it doesn't sustain anyone on its own. And how can I fix the mistakes I've made? By doing things differently from now on, and you've already started." After dinner, David offered to help Emily with her homework. He discovered that she struggled with writing but excelled in math and science. "Emily, how about we write an essay together? You can write about what you want to be when you grow up." "Can I write about engineering?" "Absolutely, and I can help you with the technical terms." For an hour, David and Emily worked together on the essay. She wrote about her dream of building beautiful and safe homes for poor families, where children could play without getting hurt, and where parents could rest after work. "Mr. David," Emily suddenly said, "when I become an engineer, can I work with you? Emily, when you graduate in engineering, I hope to have a company that deserves to have you as a partner." "Partner? What does that mean?" "It's when two people work together to make something better than either could do alone." As David was leaving, Emily ran up to him and handed him a drawing she had made during the afternoon. "For you, Mr. David." The drawing depicted 3 figures, a tall man in a suit, a woman in an apron, and a small girl. They were holding hands in front of a colorful building with many windows. At the bottom, in large, uneven letters, it read, "My family." David felt his eyes welling up with tears. "Emily, may I ask who these people are in the drawing?" "You, my mom, and me. And this is the beautiful building we are going to build together when I become an engineer." For the first time in his adult life, David Anderson felt truly part of a family. Not a family united by blood or marriage contracts, but by something much more powerful, genuine love and shared purpose. In the car, on his way home, David looked again at Emily's drawing and made a decision that would change not only his company, but his entire life. The next morning, he would confront Mr. Johnson with all the strength his position allowed, and he wouldn't stop there. The following morning, David arrived at the office at 7 o'clock, carrying a folder with all the audit documents and Emily's drawing carefully stored in a plastic sleeve. He placed the drawing in a simple frame and positioned it on his desk, where a photo of him receiving a business award used to be. At exactly 9 o'clock, Mr. Johnson arrived at the office wearing an expensive suit and carrying an Italian leather briefcase. He was a 50-year-old man, with neatly combed grey hair, a trimmed moustache, and the confident air of someone used to negotiating only with numbers, never with the human consequences of his business. "Mr. Anderson, what a pleasure to be here. I hope there are no issues with our services. CleanCo has always been a reliable partner for your company." David did not rise from his chair or offer his hand. "Have a seat, Mr. Johnson. We have a lot to discuss." Mr. Johnson settled into the chair across from the desk, immediately noticing the coldness in David's tone. "Of course, Mr. Anderson. I'm at your service." David opened the folder and pulled out the audit report. "Mr. Johnson, your company receives $320,000 a month from us. You employ 48 workers. Can you explain how you arrive at the salaries you pay these workers?" Mr. Johnson cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, Mr. Anderson, there are operational costs, taxes, equipment, administration." "Mr. Johnson, don't interrupt me with evasions. Sarah Anderson works for you 6 nights a week, cleaning 12 floors alone, and receives $900 net per month. That's less than $4 an hour. How do you justify that amount?" Mr. Johnson's expression changed, revealing a calculating coldness. "Mr. Anderson, with all due respect, the job market determines salaries. If Sarah is not satisfied, there are others willing to work for that amount." "Others willing to starve, you mean?" "Mr. Anderson, I don't understand where you're going with this. We meet all legal requirements. We register the employees, pay the taxes." David slammed his hand on the table with force. "Sarah fainted from hunger in my building. A 28-year-old woman deprives herself of food to feed her 7-year-old daughter because the salary you pay is not enough to support a family." Mr. Johnson leaned back in his chair, adopting a defensive posture. "Mr. Anderson, I regret the incident, but I cannot be held responsible for my employee's eating habits. If she has personal problems..." "Personal problems?" David stood up abruptly. "Are you telling me that hunger is a personal problem? Mr. Anderson, perhaps you do not understand the realities of the job market for low-skilled workers. Sarah does not have a high school diploma. She lacks specific technical experience. And that justifies her earning a miserable salary." Mr. Johnson sighed, as if he were losing patience with a petulant child. "Mr. Anderson, if we raise the salaries of the cleaning staff, we will have to pass those costs on to our clients, and I'm sure you wouldn't want to pay more for our services." David walked over to the window, observing the hustle and bustle of the city below. "Mr. Johnson, how much did you earn last year?" "That is confidential information, Mr. Anderson." David turned to face him. $2,800,000 net. Your company made almost $3 million while paying starvation wages to 48 families. Mr. Johnson turned pale. How had David obtained that information? "Mr. Johnson, starting next month I want all employees, the CleanCo workers who operate in my building should receive at least $2,000 net per month, have meal vouchers, basic health insurance, and new safety equipment." "Mr. Anderson, that is impossible. It would increase our costs by more than 100%. Then increase your proposals. We will pay a fair price for the services." Michael stood up abruptly. "Mr. Anderson, you are proposing to put my company out of business. No businessman can operate with such low margins." David returned to his chair and picked up a calculator. "Mr. Toledo, if we increase your contract to $500,000 per month, and if you reduce your profits to $50,000 per month instead of $200,000, can you pay decent salaries to your employees?" Michael quickly did the math. $50,000 a month still represented $600,000 in annual profit, a considerable amount, but much less than he was used to. "Mr. Anderson, I need to think, calculate. There's nothing to think about, Mr. Toledo. Do you accept the new conditions, or do we terminate the contract? I have 3 cleaning companies interested in working with us under the standards I am establishing. Michael tried to negotiate. Mr. Anderson, we can reach a middle ground, perhaps a gradual increase over 6 months. Mr. Toledo, Sarah has a 7-year-old daughter who dreams of being an engineer. That child cannot wait 6 months for her mother to be able to eat properly. You are being too emotional, Mr. Anderson. Business is business. David stood up and walked to the office door, opening it. Mr. Toledo, you are right. Business is business, and my business now includes social responsibility. If you cannot comply, I will find someone who can. Michael sat for a few seconds, processing the ultimatum. Finally, he stood up, grabbed his briefcase, and walked toward the door. Mr. Anderson, you are making a mistake. When your competitors find out that you are paying above market rates, they will have a competitive advantage over you. Mr. Toledo, when my competitors find out that I'm treating workers with dignity, perhaps they will learn something about business leadership. Michael left the office, slamming the door. 2 hours later, David received a call from Michael Toledo accepting all the proposed conditions. That afternoon, David decided to visit Sarah personally to inform her about the changes. When he arrived at the Hope Residential Complex, he found apartment 312 in chaos. Ms. Hope was in the kitchen preparing a cake. Sarah was tidying up the living room, and Emily was on the floor surrounded by books and papers. "Mr. David," Emily shouted, running to hug him. "Guess what? Ms. Johnson said my essay about engineering was the best in the class, and she wants to talk to you." "Really, Emily? That's wonderful." Sarah approached, drying her hands on her apron. "Mr. Anderson, Emily's teacher sent a note saying she wants to meet you. It seems Emily can't stop talking about you at school." David smiled. "It will be a pleasure to meet her teacher. But first, I have news for you, Sarah." He told her about the meeting with Michael Toledo and the changes in the working conditions at Clean Co. Sarah listened in silence, her eyes filling with tears. "Mr. Anderson, are you saying I will earn $2,000 a month?" "That's right. And you will have meal vouchers, health insurance, and proper safety equipment." Sarah sat on the sofa, covering her face with her hands. "I can't believe it. With $2,000, I can go back to studying at night. I can buy new clothes for Emily. I can eat every day," Emily added with the brutal honesty of children. "Emily," Sarah said, embarrassed. "No, Sarah, Emily is right. Now you can live with dignity." Ms. Hope appeared in the living room with a tray of coffee and still warm carrot cake. "Mr. David, you are an angel sent by God to our family. Ms. Hope, the one who changed is me. You taught me what truly matters in life." That night during dinner, Emily asked a question that deeply touched David. "Mr. David, when your daughter comes to visit you, can I meet her?" "Of course, Emily. I think you two will get along very well. Does she like math too?" David hesitated. The truth was that he didn't know what Lily liked. In recent years, their conversations had been limited to formal greetings and discussions about money. "To be honest, Emily, I don't really know what Lily likes. I've spent so much time working that I forgot to get to know my own daughter. But now you can get to know her, can't you? Just like you are getting to know me." "I hope so, Emily." When David got home that night, he found 5 messages from his main partners at the office. They all wanted urgent meetings to discuss the radical changes in the company's policy. Before returning the calls, David called Lily in Paris. "Dad, 2 calls in the same week. Something really happened." "Lily, I want to ask you a question. What do you like? What are your dreams?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Dad, why are you asking this?" "Because I realized I'm a terrible father. I don't know anything about you." Lily laughed, but it was a melancholic laugh. "Dad, I like literature, art history. I want to study museology. I dream of working at the Louvre one day. And why did you never tell me this? Dad, every time we talked, you only wanted to know about my grades and how much money Mom was spending. You never seemed interested in who I really am. David closed his eyes, feeling the weight of years of superficial relationship with his own daughter, Lily. When you come to visit me in December, I want to truly get to know you, and I want to introduce you to a special girl who has taught me a lot about what it means to be family. Dad, who is this girl? David spent an hour telling Lily about Emily, Sarah, and Ms. Hope, about how they had changed his perspective on everything. Dad, I'm proud of you, Lily said at the end of the conversation. You finally found your heart. When David hung up, he knew that the changes he had initiated. David Anderson was facing consequences that went far beyond business. Some partners would try to resist, some contracts would be lost, and some profits would be reduced. But for the first time in his adult life, David was building something more valuable than wealth. He was building a legacy of human dignity, and that was worth any price. The following Monday, David faced the biggest crisis of his business career. He arrived at the office at 7 in the morning and found an emergency meeting already scheduled by the 5 main partners of the construction company for 8 o'clock. When he entered the conference room, he immediately sensed he was facing something akin to a corporate mutiny. Dr. August Silveira, founding partner and 68-year-old man who had invested in the company from the beginning, was sitting at the head of the table with a stern expression. Beside him, Dr. Fernando Campos, an investor who held 20% of the shares, was flipping through papers with a disapproving look. The other 3 partners, Dr. Robert Mendez, Dr. Patricia Alves, and Dr. Charles August, were watching David with a mix of concern and hostility. David, Dr. August began without preamble, we've received alarming reports about your recent business decisions. We need to talk. David sat in his usual chair. I assume this is about the changes in the outsourcing policy. Dr. Fernando slammed a folder on the table. David, you increased operational costs by 40% overnight, without consulting the board, without impact analysis, without consideration for the shareholders. Fernando, I corrected an injustice that has lasted for years. Dr. Patricia, a 50-year-old woman known for her coldness in business, leaned forward. David, injustice? You're confusing business with a charity organization. Our obligation is to the shareholders' profits, not social welfare. Patricia, have you visited any of our construction sites? Have you talked to the workers who build our buildings? Dr. Robert laughed sarcastically. David, we don't hire workers to chat with them. We hire them to produce. David stood up, walking over to the window. Do you know how much Jack Smith, who works at the Clearwaters site, earns per hour? $7.50. He works 10 hours a day, 6 days a week to support a family of 4. David, Dr. August said in a paternal yet firm tone, I understand you're going through a humanitarian phase, but we can't run a $200 million company based on emotionalism. Emotionalism? David turned to face the partners. Do you think treating people with dignity is emotionalism? Dr. Fernando opened a laptop and began showing spreadsheets. David, your humanitarian adjustments have reduced our profit margin from 32 to 19%. In a year, that represents a loss of $15 million. And how much is the life of Sarah Anderson worth? How much is the future of Emily, a brilliant child who dreams of being an engineer? Dr. Patricia sighed impatiently. David, who are these people? Why are we discussing individual outsourced employees? In a strategic meeting, David returned to his chair and told the whole story. How he found Emily on the street, how he met Sarah and Ms. Hope, how he discovered the subhuman working conditions that sustained the company's profits. The partners listened in silence, their expressions ranging from skepticism to irritation. "David," Dr. August said when he finished, "that story is touching, but you can't reform an entire company based on an isolated personal experience." Isolated. David grabbed a folder with reports. "I conducted a full audit. We have 470 outsourced employees working under conditions similar to Sarah's. 470 families living in poverty while we generate record profits." Dr. Charles, who had remained silent, finally spoke up. "David, even if your intentions are noble, you're setting a dangerous precedent. If all business owners start paying above market wages, the economy will become unsustainable." "Charles, what if all business owners start paying decent wages? Maybe we could create a fairer economy." Dr. Fernando abruptly closed the laptop. "David, let's be practical. Either you revert to the previous standards, or we will have to consider other options." David frowned. "What other options?" Dr. August cleared his throat uncomfortably. "David, as the majority partner, you hold 51% of the shares, but the other 49% are in our hands. If necessary, we can call an extraordinary meeting and question your leadership ability." The silence in the room was deafening. David looked at each of the partners, people he had considered partners for decades, and realized he was completely alone. "Are you threatening me?" "We're trying to save you from yourself," Dr. Patricia said. "David, you built an admirable empire. Don't destroy it because of a late outbreak of social conscience." David slowly stood up. "The meeting is over. I will think about what you said." As he left the conference room, David felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. In 20 years of partnership, he had never faced such a direct rebellion. Jessica, his secretary, immediately noticed his state. "Mr. Anderson, are you okay? You look down." "Jessica, cancel all my appointments for today. I need to get out." David spent the morning driving aimlessly through the streets of New York, trying to process the ultimatum from the partners. He stopped at a small cafe in the city center and, for the first time in years, had coffee in a plastic cup, sitting at a Formica table, watching ordinary people live their ordinary lives. It was then that his phone rang. It was Ms. Johnson, Emily's teacher. "Mr. David, this is Rosa Johnson, Emily's teacher. She gave me your number and said you would like to talk to me." "Of course, Ms. Johnson. Emily talks a lot about you." "Mr. David, can I meet you this afternoon? I have something important to discuss about Emily." "Sure. What time and where?" "At the school, at 4 o'clock. It's my break time." Anisfield Academy was 3/4 of a mile from the Hope residential complex. It was a simple 2-story building with walls that needed painting and a small yard with basic playground equipment. David arrived at 4 o'clock sharp and was greeted by Ms. Johnson, a woman in her 40s with black hair tied in a bun, reading glasses hanging from her chest, and a warm smile that immediately put him at ease. "Mr. David, what a pleasure to meet you. Emily can't stop talking about you. In fact, all her essays lately are about engineering and the Mr. David who teaches math." They sat in a small room that served as the school's library. The shelves were filled with used textbooks and some donated children's literature. "Ms. Johnson, Emily is a special child." "That's exactly what I want to talk to you about. Emily has extraordinary academic potential. In math, she's at least 2 years ahead of her class. In science, she asks questions that make me research to answer." David smiled with pride, as if he were Emily's biological father. "She really is brilliant." "Mr. David, the problem is that our school lacks the resources to develop this potential. We have 40 students per class, few books, and I am the only teacher for all subjects. What are you suggesting?" Ms. Johnson hesitated for a moment. "Mr. David, Emily needs a better education, a private school with adequate resources, tutoring, access to laboratories. And what is the cost of that? A good private school would cost around $2,000 a month, plus school supplies, uniforms, transportation. David did some mental calculations. $2,500 a month to give Emily the education she deserved. An insignificant amount for him, but transformative for her future. Ms. Johnson, what happens if Emily continues studying here? Ms. Johnson sighed. She will develop because she is intelligent and hardworking, but she won't have the opportunities she could have. And that is an injustice, Mr. David. An injustice? Yes, because intelligence shouldn't depend on the financial condition of the parents. Emily could be a brilliant engineer, a scientist, a researcher, but if she doesn't have access to the right tools during childhood, David understood perfectly. It was exactly what was happening with his company, talents being wasted due to artificial economic limitations. Ms. Johnson, if I can transfer Emily to a better school, do you think Sarah would agree? I'm sure she would. Sarah would do anything for Emily's future. When David left the school, he had a new purpose. If the partners wanted a fight, he would give them a fight, but he wouldn't give up the principles that Emily had awakened in him. That night, in apartment 312, David had dinner with his chosen family and shared the offer of a better education for Emily. The reaction was even more emotional than he expected. Sarah cried. Ms. Hope cried. Emily jumped on the sofa with joy. "Mr. David, this is a dream!" Emily shouted. "A school with a real lab, with computers? Emily, you will study at one of the best schools in the city, and you will have private lessons in math and science. And when I graduate, can I work with you?" David looked at the 7-year-old girl who had changed his life and said with total conviction, "Emily, when you graduate, I hope to have built a company worthy of having you as a partner." That night, David made the most important decision of his career. He would fight for his new principles, regardless of the financial consequences. The war with the partners had just begun. December arrived with the typical heat of summer in New York, and an anticipation that made David anxious like he hadn't felt in years. Lily would arrive from Paris on the 15th to spend the holiday season with him, and it would be the first time in 3 years that they would spend more than a week together. More importantly, it would be the first meeting between Lily and Emily, two girls who had transformed his life in completely different ways. In the last 2 months, the war with the partners had intensified. Dr. Johnson and Dr. Smith had hired a legal consultancy to explore the possibility of removing David from the presidency of the company. In response, David had implemented even more radical changes. He created a scholarship program for the children of contracted employees, established a medical emergency fund, and started building a daycare center in the company building itself. "Mr. Anderson," Jessica said one morning, "Dr. Johnson called again. He insists on scheduling an urgent meeting with all the partners. Jessica, tell Dr. Johnson that I am available on Thursday at 10 o'clock, and I will not accept any more. Discussions about reversing the social changes. What David didn't know was that the partners had discovered his adoptive family in the Hope residential complex. Dr. Smith had hired a private investigator to understand the motivations behind David's irrational decisions. That afternoon, when David arrived at apartment 312 for his weekly dinner, he found Sarah visibly nervous and Ms. Hope with a worried expression. "Mr. David," Sarah said as soon as he entered, "this morning, a man was here asking questions about you." David felt a chill. "What kind of questions?" "He introduced himself as a journalist and said he was writing an article about businessmen who do social work. He asked about our relationship with you, how much time you spend here, if you give us money." "And what did you say?" Miss Hope spoke up indignantly. "I told him it was none of his business, that you are part of our family, and that we don't discuss our private lives with strangers." "But, Mom," Emily said, appearing from the kitchen with her hands covered in cake batter, "why would someone want to know about Mr. David?" David knelt to be at Emily's height. "Sometimes, when people make important changes, other people get curious. But these are good changes, aren't they? Like when I learn new math." "Exactly, Emily. They are good changes." That night, David called his personal lawyer, Dr. Anthony Fields, a 60-year-old man he had known since college. "Anthony, I need your help. I suspect my partners are investigating my personal life." "David, this could be an attempt to find reasons to question your executive competence. Do you have something to hide?" David pondered the question. Did he have something to hide? His friendship with a low-income family? The genuine love he felt for a 7-year-old child? The fact that he had discovered there were more important values than profit? "No, Anthony, I have nothing to hide." "Then don't worry, keep doing what you think is right." On December 15th, David arrived at JFK Airport 2 hours before Lily's flight. He was so nervous that he felt like a teenager on a first date. When Lily appeared at international arrivals, David needed a few seconds to recognize his daughter. The shy 15-year-old girl he remembered had transformed into an elegant 17-year-old young woman. Lily was tall like her mother, had long, wavy brown hair, piercing green eyes, and a confident posture that revealed the refined education she had received in Paris. "Dad!" Lily ran to hug him, and David felt that the embrace lasted an eternity, yet passed too quickly. "Lily, you've grown so much. You look beautiful." "Dad, you also seem different. More, I don't know, more human." During the ride from the airport to David's apartment, Lily talked about her life in Paris, her studies, the museums she visited, and the books she read. David realized that his daughter was a cultured, intelligent, and sensitive young woman, and he felt a pang of sadness for having lost so much time with her. "Dad, when will I meet the famous Emily? You talk about her so much that I'm jealous." Lily laughed. "Tomorrow night we're having dinner with them. But first, I want to show you some special places." The next day, David took Lily to visit the Hope residential complex. He wanted her to understand the context in which he had met Sarah, Ms. Hope, and Emily. When they arrived at the location, Lily observed everything with the eyes of someone who had grown up in Paris, but without any sign of prejudice. "Dad, the conditions here are quite difficult, aren't they?" "They are, Lily, and our company built this place. For years, I only thought about profits, never about the people who would live here." "And now you're trying to fix it?" "I'm trying to do things differently from now on." When they rang the bell for apartment 312, David felt an anxiety he hadn't experienced in years. What if Lily and Emily didn't get along? What if the age and background differences created a barrier? Ms. Hope opened the door and immediately hugged Lily as if she were a beloved granddaughter. "Lily." "What? A beautiful girl. Emily has been eager to meet you since this morning." Emily came running from the living room, stopped abruptly when she saw Lily, and spent a few seconds admiring the young French girl. "Are you Lily, Mr. David's daughter?" "I am. And you must be the famous Emily that my dad can't stop praising." To David's surprise, Emily got straight to the point with the brutal honesty of children. "Lily, you're really pretty, and you talk differently. Is it because of Paris?" Lily laughed, knelt down to be at Emily's height, and replied in English with a deliberate French accent. "Thank you, my little one. Yes, it's because of Paris." Emily burst into laughter. "Can you teach me how to speak French?" "Of course. And you can teach me math. My dad said you're a genius." From that moment on, any worries David had melted away. Lily and Emily connected instantly, despite their age difference. Lily had the patience and affection of an older sister, and Emily had the curiosity and energy that captivated anyone. During dinner, David witnessed a scene he would never forget. Lily helping Emily cut her meat, the two chatting about dreams and plans, Sarah telling Lily about her cleaning job, Ms. Hope showing photos from when Lily was a baby, which David had sent years ago, and all laughing together as if they were a family that had been together for decades. "Lily," Emily suddenly said, "when I become an engineer, can I visit you in Paris?" "Of course, Emily. I'll show you the Eiffel Tower and all the museums. And when you come back to live in Brazil, can you work with Mr. David and me?" Lily looked at her father. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about this. I want to come back to Brazil next year to go to college here." David nearly choked on his coffee. "Really, Lily? Why?" "Because I realized I want to be part of the changes you're creating. I want to study business administration and learn about corporate social responsibility." Emily clapped her hands. "Then let's work together. Lily, Mr. David and I will build beautiful buildings for everyone." That night, as they were returning to David's apartment, Lily asked a question that caught him off guard. "Dad, are you going to officially adopt Emily?" David had never thought about that formally. "Why do you ask, Lily?" "Because it's obvious that you love each other like father and daughter, and she needs a present father. And how would you feel about that?" Lily held her father's hand. "Dad, I would love to have Emily as an official sister. She's amazing. And besides, seeing you with her, I finally understand what kind of father you've always wanted to be." "What kind, Lily?" "A present, loving father who teaches by example. You were never like that with me because you were too busy building wealth, but with Emily, you're building a relationship." David felt his eyes welling up with tears. "Lily, I'm sorry for the years we've lost. Dad, we haven't lost anything. Now we have the chance to build something new. And with Emily, Sarah, and Ms. Hope, our family became so much better." The next day, David made a decision that would change his life forever. He called Dr. Anthony Fields and asked to start the adoption process for Emily. He also instructed his lawyer to draft a new will, including Emily as a beneficiary and establishing an educational fund for low-income children. When he told Sarah about his intention to adopt Emily, she cried for 15 straight minutes. "Mr. David, are you sure? Emily is my daughter, but I know you can give her opportunities I could never provide." "Sarah, I don't want to take Emily away from you. I want us to be a family, all of us. Lily, you, Emily, Miss Hope and me. But how would that work? You could move to a bigger apartment close to a good school for Emily, or if you want, you can live with me. I have plenty of space." Sarah was silent for several minutes, processing the proposal. "Mr. David, I need to talk to Emily about this. She needs to understand what it means." When they asked Emily if she would like David to be her official father, she responded with the typical simplicity of children. "He's already my dad in my heart. Now it will be on paper too." In December 2024, exactly 1 year after meeting Emily on the street, David Anderson officially began the adoption process for the girl who had transformed his life. And for the first time in decades, he was building something that no amount of money could buy, a family united by true love. 6 months later, on a sunny morning in June 2025, David woke up in his new home, a spacious residence in Brooklyn that he had bought specifically to accommodate his unconventional family. The sound of laughter coming from the kitchen made him smile even before he fully opened his eyes. "Dad, David, Lily is trying to make French toast, but it looks like an omelette." Emily's voice echoed down the hall, followed by Lily's laughter. "Emily, it's because you didn't stop stirring the batter. In Paris, no one stirs it that much," Lily protested playfully. David went downstairs and found a scene that still moved him every day. Emily, now 8 years old, wearing an apron that Miss Hope had made especially for her, was standing on a chair helping Lily prepare breakfast. Sarah, wearing the uniform of the new cleaning company that David had created, Dignified Cleaning, with fair wages and proper conditions, was having coffee and reviewing some papers from the night school business administration course she had started. Ms. Hope, who was now officially part of the family as the chosen grandmother, was sitting at the large wooden table reading the newspaper and commenting on political news with the wisdom of someone who had lived a long life. "Good morning, my family," David said, hugging Emily first, then Lily, kissing Sarah on the cheek and giving a warm hug to Ms. Hope. "Dad, guess what? Today is the day of the interview at the construction company," Emily said, jumping with excitement. "The principal of the new school said I can do a presentation about my sustainable building project." David smiled with pride. Emily had adapted perfectly to Beacon Academy, one of the best schools in New York. Not only were her grades excellent, but she had developed engineering projects that impressed even the university professors David knew. "Emily, are you ready to show your drawings?" "Ready." Lily helped me organize everything in a nice folder, and Mom Sarah reviewed my presentation. David looked at Sarah, who had completely transformed over the past year. The night school business administration course, proper nutrition and financial stability had restored a confidence and vitality to her that she probably never had the opportunity to develop. "Sarah, how are your studies?" "David, I never thought I would be able to understand financial math, but I'm doing well. And the best part is that I can apply what I learn in the company." Dignified Cleaning had become a model for social business. David had created it as an independent company, hiring all the former employees of CleanCo with dignified salaries, full benefits, and profit sharing. Sarah had become the general supervisor, and the company not only served Anderson Construction, but had also secured contracts with other companies that valued social responsibility. "Dad, David," Lily said, serving pancakes that, despite the joke, were perfect. "Did you see the newspaper today? There was an article about our company." David picked up the afternoon journal and read the headline, "Anderson Construction, the business model that balances profit with social responsibility." The two-page article told the story of how the company had transformed its practices, maintained profitability, and become a reference in sustainability and social justice. "And the best part," Lily continued, "is that 3 competitors have already called wanting to know how to implement similar policies." The transformation of the company had not been easy. David had to buy out the shares of 3 of the 5 original partners who refused to accept the changes. Dr. August and Dr. Fernando left the partnership, taking their investments but unable to stop the new direction of the company. New, conscious investors had joined the project, and the company not only maintained its profitability, but attracted a distinguished clientele that valued ethical practices. "Ms. Hope," David said, "how are you feeling as the family well-being coordinator of the company?" Ms. Hope laughed. "Mr. David, I, who always cleaned houses for others, now have my own office at the company and help the families of the employees. Just yesterday, I guided Jack's wife on how to enroll her son in a technical school." The Family Well-Being Program had been one of the company's most successful innovations. Ms. Hope, with her life experience and natural wisdom, offered guidance and support to the families of the employees, creating a network of solidarity that strengthened the entire community. Corporate. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the whole family headed to the Anderson Construction Building for Emily's special presentation. The company had been renovated in recent months. It now had a daycare on the ground floor, a community library on the second floor, and a vocational training center on the third floor. When they arrived at the meeting room on the 40th floor, David was thrilled to see who had come to hear Emily, Not only the new directors of the company, but also Jack, who had been promoted to site supervisor, Ms. Johnson, who was now advising the company's educational program, and even Michael Anderson from the former Clean Co., who had completely revamped his business practices after David's example. Emily, wearing a blue dress that Lily had chosen for her and carrying a portfolio of drawings, climbed onto a chair to be at the height of the projector that Lily had prepared. "Good morning, everyone," Emily began with a confidence that surprised everyone. "My name is Emily Anderson." She had added David's surname after the official adoption. "And I am 8 years old. Today, I will present my project, Buildings That Embrace Families." For 20 minutes, Emily presented drawings and concepts of affordable housing that included green spaces, safe playgrounds, community rooms, and even small urban gardens. Her mathematical calculations were correct, her ideas were feasible, and her passion was contagious. "And the most important thing," Emily concluded, "is that these buildings will cost the same to build as regular buildings, but they will make families happier." When she finished, there was a round of applause that lasted almost 5 minutes. David was openly crying. Sarah had her hands on her chest in emotion. Lily was filming everything, and Miss Hope was murmuring prayers of gratitude. Michael Anderson, who had stayed with the company and adapted to the new philosophy, stood up. "Emily, the board approves your project. We will implement your ideas in the next housing complex we build." After the presentation, the family gathered at the restaurant on the top floor of the building, which now served homemade food prepared by cooks from the Hope Residential Complex community, transformed into a center of housing excellence. "Dad David," Emily said, eating a piece of carrot cake made by Aunt Mary, Jack's wife, "when I grow up and become an engineer, how many beautiful buildings will our company have built?" David looked out the window, observing the city of New York stretching to the horizon. "Emily, when you become an engineer, we will have built something much more important than buildings." "What, Dad?" "We will have built a new way for people to live together with dignity, respect, and love." Lily approached and hugged her father. "Dad, thank you for showing me what really matters in life." Sarah held David's hand. "David, thank you for saving our family and for teaching us that dreams can come true." Ms. Hope, at 72 years old, and with the wisdom of a lifetime, raised her coffee cup. "Mr. David, on the day you found Emily crying in the street, God used a child to teach an important man about what it means to be a real person." David looked around the table, at Emily, who was drawing colorful buildings on a piece of paper, at Lily, who was organizing photos from the presentation, at Sarah, who was proudly reviewing the course materials, at Ms. Hope, who was sewing a small apron for Emily's doll. In a year and a half, his life had changed completely. He lost some partners but gained a family. He reduced some financial profits but multiplied his emotional wealth. He transformed business practices but most importantly, transformed himself. "Do you know what moves me the most?" David said, looking at each member of his chosen family. "What, Dad?" Emily asked, stopping her drawing. "It's knowing that it all started when a brave 7-year-old girl had the courage to stop an important man in the street and ask for help to find her mother." Emily smiled, showing the front tooth that was coming in. "Dad David, I didn't stop just any important man. I stopped my dad." At that moment, David Anderson understood that he had built the most important project of his life, a family based on true love, and a company based on human dignity. And it all started with a simple question from a child. "Please, sir, have you seen my mother?" The question that changed an empire, transformed a man, and proved that sometimes the greatest miracles begin with the smallest acts of courage. As the sun set over New York on that June day, David knew he was not just contemplating the end of another day, but the beginning of a new era. For his family, for his company, and for all the people whose lives had been touched by the courage of a girl who refused to give up on seeking hope.